Well, good afternoon, and thank you, Scott. And as Scott indicated, I'm here to present a description of a screening level assessment system that we have developed for classifying hydraulic fracturing fluid additives in terms of their potential human health and environmental risks. This is the second time that I've been before this forum. So this really represents an update in terms of where the system is at, and I'm pleased to say that it is essentially complete. The system is now in use, but having said that, it just ain't over till it's over. And I would suspect as we move out in time, as new information becomes available, as new regulatory initiatives get launched, and as new concerns around hydraulic fracturing, and in particular concerns around the additives that are included as part of the fluid systems, as new concerns mount, we will be continuing to make changes in the system to accommodate that new information and those new concerns. So I guess all I can offer at this time is just stay tuned forever. I'd just like to start by taking a couple of minutes to acknowledge the support that was provided to Intrinsik as we launched into the development of the system. Over the course of the last 2.5 years, while the system has been under development, we have met with a number of different groups and a number of different individuals, and we did receive a lot of very sage advice, very good input. That was all folded into the system, and it just basically made it a better project. So just by way of acknowledgement, the system initially was developed under the sponsorship and leadership of Encana. Encana was interested in knowing the nature of the fluid additives that they were using in their operation, and they were interested in obtaining an understanding of what the potential health and environmental hazards associated with those additives might be. That was all part of their responsible products program. So initial leadership was provided by Encana, and I'd just like to acknowledge the support and assistance of folks like Richard Dunn, Stephen Scarsdale, and Brent Harrison from Encana, because the system probably wouldn't have got to where it is today without Encana's support. Once the awareness of the system built, once Encana introduced it, CAPP took over ownership of the system, so I'd like to acknowledge the support of the CAPP Shale Water technical and steering committees. Again, both of those groups provided a lot of good advice that helped shape the system. In terms of the technical committee, I know that Scott Hillier was part of the committee, as well as Stephen Scarsdale, Keith Minnick, and Tara Payment from CAPP. During the course of the development, we also met with a number of individuals, a number of different organizations, one or a few of which were the regulatory authorities. So we did meet with the ERCB, for instance, here in Alberta, with the BC Oil and Gas Commission, with the Interstate Oil and Gas Commission Compact out of the US, as well as Health Canada, Environment Canada. So a number of different provincial and federal regulatory authorities did express an interest in the system, and we did meet with them, and again, they did offer a good deal of support and advice, which again made the system better. So just by way of acknowledgement, a lot of people, a lot of groups helped in the development of this system, and I just want to pay tribute to those folks. Now, those of you who are familiar with shale gas and shale oil, and the fact that we now have the ability to exploit these reserves through the combination of horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracturing, I think most of you would appreciate that these reserves carry a lot of promise in terms of energy supplies and energy security, particularly for countries that are energy reliant, such as Canada and the US. So as well as providing energy security, it's kept obviously the price of oil and gas at reasonable levels, so it's providing a benefit to the consumer, to the economy in general. But as well as the promise that comes with shale gas or shale oil development are a number of challenges, not the least of which are public concerns over hydraulic fracturing. So anyone who's probably picked up a paper or read a magazine in the last couple of years, particularly here in Calgary, can't help but notice a number of articles that have been devoted to shale gas and in particular hydraulic fracturing, and they have spoken to the concerns that have been expressed by the public with respect to this particular technique. The concerns, there's a host of different concerns, some of which relate to water, some of which relate to air, concerns with seismicity, concerns with habitat destruction, concerns over disclosure of the fracking fluid additive ingredients. So there's just simply like a host of concerns that present a challenge not only to the industry but also to the regulatory agencies that are faced with trying to grapple with these public attitudes, which tend to be negative at this point in time, at least, toward hydraulic fracturing. For the purposes of this forum, you know, the two concerns that are of primary interest are the impacts on both water quality and water quantity. And as a result of those concerns, we're seeing signs such as this popping up across communities in North America. In terms of the impact on water quality, the concern originates from the fact that rather copious amounts of water are required for hydraulic fracturing, and the concern is with the use of these water and delivery of these amounts of water downhole, is there going to be a drawdown on potable drinking water supplies? The concern with respect to water quality relates in part to the use of the various fracturing fluid additives that are added to the fluid system to impart particular properties to allow those systems to better perform. So these additives that are shown on this particular slide, they include friction reducers, surfactants, corrosion inhibitors, biocides, scale inhibitors, gelling agents, and the like. They comprise a very, very small portion of the fluid system itself, generally in the order of about 0.5%. But nevertheless, they have caught the attention of the public, and a number of concerns have been expressed by the public over the potential risks that these additives could present, particularly if they found their way into drinking water supplies. So in response to these concerns, CAPP launched an initiative that was specific to dealing with hydraulic fracturing. So they basically, a couple of years ago, introduced a set of guiding principles and a set of companion operating practices. And the operating practices speak to specific elements of hydraulic fracturing, be it baseline groundwater testing, well bore construction and design, water sourcing. But there's also a particular operating practice that relates to fracturing fluid risk assessment and management. And that is the operating practice that the system that we developed integrates with. So one of the guiding principles, one of the CAPP guiding principles for hydraulic fracturing is shown on this slide. CAPP is encouraging the members to develop and use fracturing fluid additives presenting the least environmental risks. So the movement, or at least the trend that CAPP is trying to encourage, is the use of fracturing fluids that are least likely to cause harm to human health or the environment. So this represents a very broad objective, but in terms of specifics around achieving that particular objective, again, there's a specific operating practice that relates to the assessment and management of the risks presented by these additives. That particular operating practice consists of 4 steps. They are listed here. First step begins with identifying the individual chemical ingredients that make up the additive. Then on the basis of that knowledge, the members are expected to assess the potential health risks that the additive could present. Once that step 2 is completed, the members are expected to define and implement appropriate operational controls and practices to manage any risks that are identified. And then the entire package needs to be rolled up into a risk management plan which would be similar to a product stewardship program, or in the case of Encana, the Responsible Products Program. So the system that we developed speaks specifically to item 2, which is identification and assessment of the potential health and environmental risks that the additive could present. So the purpose of the system itself is to increase awareness and understanding of the potential risks that could be associated with use of hydraulic fracturing fluid additives, and hopefully this will help guide decision making on the part of fluid suppliers as well as operators in terms of which additives to use, and also what measures to take to ensure that the use of the additive is not going to cause harm to human health or the environment. And again, the purpose is to identify additives having the lowest risk profiles to maintain consistency with the guiding practice or the guiding principle rather of CAPP, that the membership shall develop fracturing fluid additives that present the least environmental risks. Certain design requirements were set out at the beginning of the development of the system. They're listed on this slide. All of these design requirements were carefully considered. There's not one that's more important than the others. They all received equal weighting. If we begin on the left-hand side, obviously there was a need for technical robustness. We recognized that the system was going to have to undergo scrutiny by companies, by the regulators, by the scientific community. So we wanted to ensure technical robustness. We wanted an evidence-based system, so we're relying on empirical data as opposed to conjecture or supposition. System needed to be transparent, needed to be obvious to people that if you assigned an additive to a particular category, the reason for that was clear. We were looking for simplicity. We did, as part of the development of this system, look at other systems that have been developed by certain of the fluid suppliers. Quite honestly, some of those systems require a team of PhD scientists to use and a team of Philadelphia lawyers to interpret. So we wanted to avoid that level of complexity, so we stayed away from the use of complex algorithm and calculations. It needed to be flexible to accommodate new information, new concerns that might emerge into the future. It needed to be practical. We recognized it needed to be used by a number of different types of companies, not only E&P companies, but also the fluid suppliers and all the way back to the specialty or commodity chemical manufacturers. The system needed to embrace different perspectives, different audiences. We're obviously going to be interested in the system, not only the industry, but also the regulators, so we folded in their perspectives. And the system needed to have an appreciation for already existing systems. We did not want to recreate the wheel. In this regard, particular attention was given to the globally harmonized system for the classification and labeling of chemicals, which is a new system that is soon to be introduced in the US. Canada is also signatory to it. It's being used in Europe. And we wanted to ensure that the hazard classification criteria that we used were aligned with the GHS system. Key features of the system: it operates at a screening level. So we're operating at really 40,000 feet. The system is meant to provide a broad overview of what the potential health and environmental risks associated with the additives might be. This does not substitute for a highly detailed site-specific risk assessment. If there's a need for that, it goes beyond the screening level. It's a hazard-based system. That is, the focus is on the chemical, physical, and toxicological properties of the additives. So there's less emphasis given to exposure opportunities, and by virtue of the fact that the focus is on the properties as opposed to the exposure opportunities, it is a hazard-based versus a risk-based system. The system focuses on public health specifically and the environment. There was consideration given to whether it should include an occupational health component, but CAPP already had systems in place to deal with occupational health and safety, so the focus was strictly on public health. System's not meant to be used in isolation. Again, as part of the operating practice, the information that's gleaned from the use of the system is meant to be used as part of a risk management program. The system is also non-judgmental. We deliberately decided that we didn't want to go with a pass-fail system. So the system does not judge additives as being acceptable or unacceptable, or whether they are good or bad. The system, again, is just simply intended to increase awareness of what the hazards may be so that companies can take appropriate measures to reduce the likelihood of harm to human health or the environment. Key features of the system: it is additive based, but we do break the additives down into the individual chemical ingredients, and then we screen the individual chemical ingredients against certain health and environmental endpoints. We then roll the information up to back to the additive level and categorize the additive. It does require full compositional details. Initially, we started with the information provided on material safety data sheets. That was not nearly complete. The MSDS is designed for the workplace and not so much for public health and the environment. So now we have developed mechanisms to secure full compositional details. It's based on the parent compound. It doesn't deal with daughter products or byproducts. It's also dealing with the parent compounds as they're delivered downhole, so it doesn't deal with flowback water issues. It deals with the additives at full strength, which is consistent with most systems of this type that operate on a hazard basis and at a screening level. Of course, if you were going to proceed with a risk assessment, you'd take into consideration the dilution of the additives before they're delivered downhole. It does incorporate cutoff concentrations, which again is consistent with most hazard ranking systems, which just allows for the fact that if an ingredient is present in the additive at a low concentration, there's no need to screen it. The risk is by default, is accepted to be negligible. This shows the steps involved. We identify the chemical ingredients within the additive. We review the ingredients against a series of screening criteria. The information is rolled back up to the additive level. We categorize it into one of three categories. We then subsequently calculate a data availability index, which gives us a measure of the extent to which information is available on the ingredients for the different endpoints that we screen against. And then we combine the category and the data availability index to come up with an additive designation. These are the endpoints that we focus on, a series of public health and environmental endpoints. They are not unique to this system. These are endpoints that are generally regarded to be of significant concern by most regulatory and scientific authorities, and they are commonly incorporated into chemical hazard systems. So the endpoints revolve around a series of questions, those being: is the ingredient known or presumed to be a human carcinogen, human germ cell mutagen, reproductive toxicant, highly toxic by acute oral exposure, highly toxic by chronic oral exposure. And there's a like series of questions for the environmental endpoints. And depending on the answer to the question, the ingredient may or may not trigger an endpoint, and the number of endpoints and type of endpoints triggered dictate the category to which the ingredient will belong. This is just a further slide showing a little more detail around both the public health and environmental endpoints, the endpoints listed, the specific screening criteria that we use to determine whether an endpoint is triggered are listed in the cutoff concentrations. You'll notice from the screening criteria column that it's heavily weighted toward the GHS system so that we maintain consistency with the hazard classification criteria under GHS. And those are the environmental endpoints. In terms of where we source the information on the ingredients, we consult different databases. Again, there were certain selection criteria. Databases had to be developed by reputable authorities. They had to be current. They had to be easily accessible. This represents the roster of different databases that we tap into. There's an international flavor. We're tapping into databases developed by Canadian agencies, U.S. agencies, European agencies, and international agencies. We generally rely on both primary databases and secondary databases for any given endpoint. So as we search a database, if we do not find the ingredient listed, then we default to use of secondary database to provide adequate coverage. And these are simply the databases listed by endpoint. The categories, once we've screened the individual chemical ingredients, as I mentioned, we roll the information up to the categories and assign the additive to a category. These are listed here. Category A, none of the endpoints are triggered by any of the ingredients, so there's no need for any further action on the part of the on the part of the operator other than compliance with industry codes of practice and any regulations that apply. What Category A is essentially saying is that there's no obvious potential for that additive to cause adverse human health or environmental effects based on the screening endpoints that are used. Category B, one or more of the ingredients triggers one or more of the environmental endpoints, signaling that the additive could cause adverse environmental impacts. So the company is expected to then determine appropriate measures, controls, and practices that need to be implemented in order to reduce the hazard to the lowest extent possible. In Category C, you're just moving up in terms of the significance of the hazard, where one or more of the public health endpoints are triggered. The additive is potentially capable of causing adverse effects on human health. Now, in this case, one or more of the environmental screening endpoints may also be triggered, but the category is being driven by the public health endpoints. What this suggests is simply further review to determine whether, in fact, you want to use that particular additive, and if so, determine what measures need to be put in place to ensure that you do not cause harm to public health or the environment. We then calculate a data availability index. This just provides an indication of the extent to which information is available on the additives for each of the endpoints that are sourced through the screening of the different databases. It's just simply used to gauge the uncertainty or certainty or level of confidence that can be placed on the category that gets assigned. There's a rather simple equation for calculating the data availability index. There's basically 4 levels depending on the results of the calculation, and the 4 levels are just to distinguish between an additive for which there's very little information with respect to the endpoints versus an additive with just substantial amount of information is available. The additive designation, we combine it, the DAI with the additive category, come up with a designation. There's 12 designations possible, 3 categories, 4 levels of data availability. So this just shows an example. We have a category A with the subscript H, signaling that none of the ingredients trigger any of the endpoints, and there's a substantial amount of information or a high amount of information available on the ingredients. We have developed a user guide. It's available to the CAPP members. There's 2 parts. Part 1's narrative, describes the system, the basis of the system, how we came to the endpoints that we did, just an explanation of the system itself. Part 2 contains detailed instructions. All I can offer is, having written this particular manual, I have a lot of respect for people who write manuals now on compact cameras or high definition TVs or what have you, because it's a difficult exercise actually making a foolproof manual. It's based on a spreadsheet system or an Excel spreadsheet system where the information can be recorded. Current status, awareness of the system is building. We personally at Intrinsik have screened more than 500 additives, capturing more than 250 ingredients. This shows basically how the additives line up as far as the categories are concerned. Most are falling into categories A and B, a few are falling into category C. The industry is moving away from the category C compounds and moving away from the ingredients that are triggering those public health endpoints. Interest in the system is being expressed in the U.S. I was in Houston last week to be before the American Exploration and Production Council as well as the American Petroleum Institute. They are struggling with how to proceed in the U.S., where the concerns are just as great and as numerous around this topic as in Canada. So there's interest in the U.S. in following the CAPP footsteps in developing a harmonized system. So we have been down on a couple occasions to discuss the CAPP system with the U.S. companies. And the system is contributing to the greening of additives and greater awareness of the potential hazards. We're certainly seeing that with companies moving away from the use of category C compounds or products. So for further information, there's the contact information. Anybody having questions with respect to the system, by all means give us a call. That's what we're there for.